I watched my son marry a viper, and I knew it from the moment she smiled at me across the wedding hall. The champagne was flowing. 200 guests filled the ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, their laughter echoing off the crystal chandeliers. I stood near the bar, nursing my third whiskey, observing the spectacle I'd paid for. 42 years of 12-hour workdays, missed birthdays, and sacrificed weekends had led to this moment. My son Daniel, 28 years old, handsome in his rental tuxedo, was marrying Rebecca Chen. No, not Chen. I'd been told to avoid that name. Rebecca. Let's call her Rebecca Moore. Brown hair, sharp green eyes, a smile that never quite reached those eyes. She'd appeared in Daniel's life 8 months ago, and within 3 months they were engaged. Fast, I'd thought. Too fast. But Daniel was happy, or at least he seemed happy, and I'd learned long ago not to question his choices too loudly. "Dad, come take a photo," Daniel called out, waving me over to where the photographer was setting up near the wedding cake. I walked across the dance floor, my shoes clicking against the polished wood. Rebecca stood beside Daniel, her hand possessively wrapped around his arm. She wore a white dress that probably cost more than my first car, and diamond earrings that definitely did. "Smile, everyone," the photographer said. I forced my lips into something resembling happiness. The camera flashed. Rebecca's grip on Daniel tightened. "That's lovely," the photographer said. "Now just the bride and groom." I stepped back, grateful for the reprieve. I was about to return to the bar when Rebecca's voice cut through the noise. "Actually, I need to speak with you." She looked at me, those green eyes cold and calculating. "Privately." Daniel glanced between us. "Becca, maybe later. We should—" "Now," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I followed her out of the ballroom and into a quieter corridor lined with paintings of ships and seascapes. The music from the reception became muffled, distant. "I'll be direct," Rebecca said, turning to face me. "Daniel and I need a place to live. Your apartment is perfect. It's in the city, close to his work. We want the keys." I stared at her. "Excuse me. The 2-bedroom on Lexington, you barely use it anymore. You're living in the house upstate most of the time anyway." "That apartment has been mine for 23 years, I said carefully. "I worked 2 jobs to afford the down payment. You can afford another place." She took a step closer. "Daniel is your only son. This is what a good father would do. Give us the apartment. Consider it a wedding gift." The audacity of it struck me silent for a moment. "Rebecca, I'm not giving you my apartment. You and Daniel can find your own place. I'll help with the down payment if—" "That's not good enough." Her face hardened. "The apartment is in a prime location. Daniel deserves it. We deserve it." "No." The word hung in the air between us like a blade. Rebecca's expression shifted. Something ugly crossed her features, something I hadn't seen before. Without warning, her hand flew through the air. The slap connected with my cheek, sharp and stinging. My head snapped to the side. "You selfish bastard," she hissed. I touched my face, feeling the heat spreading across my skin. My ears rang. I looked at her. This woman I barely knew, this woman my son had chosen. She wasn't shocked by what she'd done. She wasn't apologetic. She was smiling. "You think you can deny me?" she said quietly. "You think you have any power here? Daniel will do what I say. He always does. And if you don't give us what we want, I'll make sure you lose everything. Starting with your son." She turned and walked back toward the ballroom, her white dress flowing behind her like a ghost. I stood in that corridor for 5 minutes, maybe longer. My cheek throbbed. The taste of whiskey had turned bitter in my mouth. I thought about following her back inside, about confronting Daniel, about making a scene. But I didn't. I was 56 years old, and I'd learned that making scenes only made things worse. Instead, I went to the coat check, retrieved my jacket, and left my son's wedding without saying goodbye. 3 days later, my phone rang at 2:47 in the morning. I'd been awake anyway. sitting in my study in the upstate house, staring at the will I'd drafted 15 years ago. Daniel was the primary beneficiary. Everything I'd built, the apartment, the house, the investment accounts, the small portfolio of rental properties, would go to him when I died. I'd always imagined he'd be grateful. I'd imagined he'd understand the sacrifices. The phone's shrill ring cut through the silence. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. "Mr. Thompson?" A man's voice, smooth and professional. "Yes." "My name is Alan. I work for Mrs. Thompson. Rebecca Thompson. She asked me to call you." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "She's not Mrs. Thompson. She's been married to my son for 3 days." "Nevertheless," Alan said, his tone unchanged, "she has concerns about the apartment situation. She'd like to resolve this amicably." "There's nothing to resolve. The answer is no." "Mr. Thompson, I think you're misunderstanding the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Thompson is prepared to take legal action. She has documentation showing that Daniel has been contributing to the apartment's maintenance costs for the past 2 years. In New York, that could establish a claim of equitable interest." I sat up straighter. "Daniel hasn't contributed a dime." "The bank records suggest otherwise. Monthly transfers from Daniel's account to yours, always marked as apartment expenses." My mind raced. Daniel had been sending me money, but that was for his student loans. I'd co-signed when he went to business school, and he'd been paying me back. But if someone wanted to twist that narrative... "This is extortion," I said. "This is business," Alan replied. "Mrs. Thompson prefers to avoid court. She's offering you a deal. Sign over the apartment, and she'll make sure Daniel maintains a relationship with you. Refuse, and you'll find yourself in a very expensive legal battle. You'll also find yourself alone. Daniel won't take your calls. You won't be invited to family gatherings. Any future grandchildren, you'll never meet them." The line went quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. "You have 48 hours to decide," Alan said. "I'll be in touch." He hung up. I sat in the darkness of my study, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 3 times. I thought about Daniel as a child, the way he used to follow me around the garage while I fixed cars on weekends. I thought about teaching him to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to change a tire. I thought about every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every time I'd chosen his needs over my own wants. And I thought about the slap, the way Rebecca had smiled afterward. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules. I called my attorney at 9 in the morning. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she'd handled my real estate transactions for 12 years. She was sharp, thorough, and expensive. "This is bad," she said after I explained the situation. We sat in her office on the 42nd floor of a building downtown, the city sprawling below us through floor-to-ceiling windows. "If they have documentation showing Daniel contributed to the apartment, they might be able to establish some claim, especially if they argue he did so with the understanding that he'd eventually take ownership." "He was paying back student loans," I said. "I have the original loan documents." "Do the transfer descriptions specify loan repayment?" I thought back to the bank statements. "No, they just say payment or apartment." Sarah frowned. "That's problematic. But here's the bigger issue. Even if we win in court, are you prepared for what that means? Your relationship with your son will be destroyed. Rebecca is already driving a wedge between you. Legal action will only widen that gap." "What's my alternative? Give them everything?" "You could transfer ownership of a smaller property. You mentioned you have rental units. Offer them one of those as a compromise. It shows good faith, and it might be enough to satisfy Rebecca without giving up your primary residence." I considered this. I owned 3 rental properties, a duplex in Brooklyn, a small house in Queens, and a condo in Jersey City. Combined, they generated about $6,000 in monthly income. Losing one would hurt, but it wouldn't destroy me. "What if I offer the Jersey City condo?" It's worth a try. Let me draft a proposal. But Mr. Thompson, she paused, choosing her words carefully. In my experience, people like Rebecca don't stop at one victory. If you give her the condo, she'll come back for more. You need to be prepared for a longer fight. I left Sarah's office with a sense of dread settling in my chest. The elevator ride down felt interminably long. When I stepped out onto the street, the afternoon sun was harsh and bright. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text. We need to talk. Call me. 3 hours later, he replied. Rebecca says you've been threatening us. Leave us alone. I stood in my kitchen, staring at those words on my phone screen. Threatening them? I'd done nothing but defend what was mine. But in Rebecca's version of events, I was the villain, and Daniel believed her. 2 weeks passed. Sarah drafted the proposal offering the Jersey City condo. Alan, Rebecca's attorney or fixer or whatever he was, rejected it within hours. The apartment on Lexington or nothing, his email said. I stopped calling Daniel. There was no point. Every attempt at contact was met with silence or hostility. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was Frank Russo, a former cop who now ran a small investigation firm out of a cramped office in Queens. He had grey hair, tired eyes, and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen too much. What do you want to know? He asked, leaning back in his chair. Everything. Rebecca Moore. Who she is, where she came from, what she's done before Daniel. You think she's done this before? I know she has. Frank nodded slowly. I'll need a retainer. $2,000 up front plus expenses. I wrote the check. 3 days later, Frank called me. You need to see this in person, he said. I met him at a diner near his office. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. Rebecca Moore isn't her real name, Frank said. She was born Rebecca Kowalski. Changed it legally 4 years ago. Before Daniel, she was married to a man named Eric Hartman, investment banker, wealthy family. They were married for 2 years. Divorced? Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. Frank tapped one of the documents. Eric's parents owned a brownstone in Brooklyn, worth about $3 million. Within a year of the marriage, Rebecca convinced Eric to have his parents transfer the property to him as an early inheritance. 6 months later, she filed for divorce. The property was considered marital asset. She walked away with half its value. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She's done this before. That's not all. Frank pulled out another document. Before Eric, there was a man named Thomas Lee. They weren't married, but they lived together for 18 months. He owned a tech startup. Rebecca convinced him to make her chief operating officer. She had access to company finances. When they broke up, she claimed he owed her for unpaid work and emotional damages. Threatened to expose some questionable accounting practices. He settled out of court for $200,000. How did you find all this? Public records, mostly. The divorce filing is public. The settlement with Thomas Lee, I have a source who knew him. He's not the type to talk about it, but he warned others in their social circle about her. I looked at the photographs. Rebecca at various charity events, always beside a different wealthy man. Rebecca at what appeared to be a business conference. Rebecca smiling for the camera, her green eyes calculating even in still images. She's a predator, I said quietly. She's smart, Frank corrected. She targets men with assets, gains their trust, maneuvers herself into a position to claim those assets, and then moves on. Your son is just her latest mark. Can I use this information? You can try, but here's the problem. Everything she's done is technically legal. Manipulative, yes, but not criminal. And if you go to Daniel with this, he'll just think you're trying to sabotage his marriage. Rebecca will spin it as you being vindictive. I closed the folder. What would you do? Frank sighed. I'd protect my assets. Transfer property out of your name if possible. Set up a trust. Make it so that even if she somehow gets to your son's inheritance, there's nothing left to inherit. But that's a defensive strategy. If you want to go on offense, he paused. That's a different conversation. I'm listening. You need leverage. Something she wants more than she wants to destroy you. Or something she's afraid of losing. I thought about this as I drove home. The folder sat on the passenger seat beside me, a collection of Rebecca's past crimes. Legal crimes, but crimes nonetheless. What did she want? Money, obviously. Control. Power over Daniel, over me, over the assets I'd spent a lifetime accumulating. What was she afraid of losing? Her reputation, perhaps. Daniel's loyalty. The life she was building with her new identity. An idea began to form. It was risky. It might backfire spectacularly. But I was tired of being defensive. I was tired of watching my son slip away. It was time to fight back. I arranged a meeting with Rebecca. It took 3 attempts before she agreed. We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan, neutral territory, public enough that neither of us could make a scene. She arrived 15 minutes late, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She sat down across from me without removing the sunglasses. "Make this quick," she said. "I have a lunch appointment." I slid the manila folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked, not touching it. "Your history." She went very still. Then, slowly, she opened the folder. I watched her face as she looked through the contents, the photographs, the documents, the newspaper clipping about her divorce from Eric Hartman. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable behind those sunglasses. "Where did you get this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I know who you are, what you've done, and I'm prepared to show this to Daniel. He won't believe you. Maybe not at first, but some of these documents are public record. He can verify them himself. And once he starts looking, once he starts asking questions, your whole story falls apart." Rebecca leaned back in her chair. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You think this scares me?" She pushed the folder back toward me. "You think Daniel will care? He loves me. He trusts me. I could show him this myself and spin it as you fabricating evidence. I could make him believe you're the villain here. You could try. Let me tell you what's going to happen," Rebecca said, leaning forward. "You're going to transfer the apartment to us. You're going to do it willingly, with a smile on your face. Because if you don't, I will destroy your relationship with your son. I will isolate him completely. You'll have nothing." "I already have nothing," I said. "You've taken my son. You've turned him against me. The apartment, it's just a building. I can walk away from it." "But you won't," she smiled. "Because deep down, you still hope Daniel will come back. You still think you can fix this. So you'll do what I say, because the alternative is losing him forever." She stood up, collecting her handbag. "You have 1 week. Sign over the apartment or lose your son. Your choice." She left without looking back. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, the folder still on the table in front of me. Rebecca was right about one thing. I didn't want to lose Daniel, but she was wrong about the apartment. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol. It represented every sacrifice I'd made, every hour I'd worked, every dream I'd deferred. And I wasn't going to give it up. Not to her. Not to anyone. I called Frank Russo that evening. "I need to know more about Alan," I said. "The man who's been calling me on Rebecca's behalf." "The fixer," Frank said. "I can look into him. What are you thinking?" "Rebecca's been using legal manipulation to get what she wants. I need to understand how she operates. Alan is part of her system. If I can figure out how he fits in, maybe I can disrupt the whole thing." "That could get messy." "It's already messy." Frank called me back 3 days later. "Alan Shepard," he said. "Not an attorney, despite what he implied on the phone. He's a business consultant, specializes in helping people navigate complex financial situations. Basically, he's a high-priced problem solver for wealthy clients who don't want to get their hands dirty. Is he legitimate? Technically, yes. He doesn't break laws, but he operates in grey areas. Intimidation, manipulation, using legal threats to pressure people into settlements. He's good at making problems go away. Where does he work? He has an office in Midtown, but here's something interesting. I did some digging into his client list. Rebecca isn't his only connection to marriage-related asset disputes. 3 years ago, he worked for a woman who was divorcing her husband. The husband owned several businesses. Alan helped her claim half of everything, despite a prenup that should have protected the husband's assets. He found a loophole in the agreement. How? The prenup specified assets existing at the time of marriage. It didn't account for assets acquired during the marriage. Alan helped her argue that the husband had used marital funds to grow his businesses, which meant she was entitled to a portion of that growth. The judge agreed. She walked away with $7 million. I felt a spark of understanding. Rebecca's using the same strategy. Probably, if she can establish that Daniel contributed to maintaining or improving your apartment, she can claim he has an equitable interest in it. Doesn't matter that he was paying back loans. Doesn't matter what your intent was. All that matters is what the bank records show. So how do I stop her? Frank was quiet for a moment. You need to change the game. Right now, you're playing defense. She makes a move, you react. You need to make her react instead. How? Find out what she values most and threaten it. Not the apartment, not Daniel's money. Something personal. I thought about this. What did Rebecca value? Her reputation, certainly. Her new identity. The life she was building. Frank, I said slowly, what if her past victims knew about each other? What if Eric Hartman and Thomas Lee knew they weren't alone? Could they do anything? Like what? Sue her? Or warn others? Go public? Make sure everyone in her social circle knows what she's done? That's a nuclear option, Frank said, and it might backfire. Daniel could see it as you being vindictive. What if it didn't come from me? What if it came from them? Frank was silent. Then he said, I can try to reach out to them, see if they're willing to talk, but no guarantees. Do it, I said. While Frank worked on contacting Rebecca's former victims, I focused on protecting my assets. Sarah Mitchell helped me set up an irrevocable trust. The apartment, the rental properties, the investment accounts, everything went into the trust with my niece as the primary beneficiary. On paper, I owned nothing. This won't stop Rebecca from pursuing Daniel's share, Sarah warned, but it limits her access to your personal assets. That's all I need. 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my house. It was the first time I'd seen him since the wedding. He looked different, thinner, tired, his eyes carrying a weight I didn't recognize. We need to talk, he said, standing on my doorstep. I let him in. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd taught him to play chess when he was 8 years old. Rebecca says you're being unreasonable, Daniel began. She says all she wants is a fair chance at building a life with me, but you're making everything difficult. Did she tell you she slapped me at your wedding? Daniel's expression didn't change. She said you were disrespectful to her, that you refused to acknowledge her as part of the family. Is that what she said? Are you calling her a liar? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, whose diapers I'd changed, whose tears I'd wiped, whose dreams I'd supported, and I saw a stranger. Daniel, do you remember when you were 15 and you wanted to drop out of school to join a band? He frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember what I told you? You said I was throwing away my future. I said you were letting someone else make your decisions for you. That band had a lead singer who convinced you he could make you famous. He was using you because we had money and you had equipment. When I pointed that out, you called me controlling. You said I didn't understand. But 6 months later, after the band fell apart and that kid moved on to his next victim, you apologized. You said I was right. This isn't the same thing, isn't it? You're letting Rebecca make decisions for you. You're letting her isolate you from your family. You're letting her manipulate you into believing I'm the enemy. Daniel stood up, his face flushing. You don't know her. You've never given her a chance. From the moment we met, you've been looking for reasons to hate her. I hired an investigator, I said quietly. He froze. You what? Rebecca's been married before. Did she tell you that? We've discussed her past. She had a difficult divorce. It doesn't matter to me. Did she tell you about Thomas Lee? Or about how she's changed her name? Or about the pattern of her targeting wealthy men, gaining access to their assets, and then moving on? Daniel's hands clenched into fists. You're lying. I have documentation, public records. I can show you everything. No. He backed toward the door. Rebecca warned me you'd do something like this. She said you'd try to poison me against her. I didn't want to believe it, but she was right. You can't stand that I'm happy. You can't stand that someone else is more important to me than you are. Daniel, I'm done, he said, his voice breaking. We're done. Don't call me. Don't contact me. If you try, I'll get a restraining order. He left, slamming the door behind him. I heard his car start, the engine roaring as he sped down the driveway. I sat alone in the living room as the sun set outside, painting the walls in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the house, that clock chimed 6 times. I'd lost him. Maybe not permanently, but for now he was gone. My phone rang. It was Frank. I have news, he said. Eric Hartman is willing to talk. So is Thomas Lee. They want to meet with you. We met in Eric Hartman's apartment, a spacious place overlooking Central Park. Eric was in his late 30s, tall and lean with the kind of polish that came from old money. Thomas Lee was younger, maybe 32, dressed in casual tech industry style, jeans, sneakers, an expensive watch. Thank you for agreeing to this, I said as we settled in Eric's living room. Frank said you're dealing with Rebecca, Eric said. That's reason enough. Thomas nodded. She cost me my company. Not directly, but the fallout from her accusations scared off investors. I had to sell for a fraction of what it was worth. Tell me about your experiences with her, I said. Eric went first. She seemed perfect at first, intelligent, charming, interested in my work. We got married fast. 6 months after we met, I thought she was the one. Then she started making suggestions. My parents owned a brownstone in Brooklyn. She convinced me they should transfer it to me as an early inheritance for tax reasons. I believed her. My parents trusted me. Within a year of getting the deed, she filed for divorce. Her attorney argued that I'd acquired the property during our marriage, which made it marital property. The judge agreed. She walked away with $1.5 million. Did you know about her past when you married her? No. She told me she'd changed her name for professional reasons. Said her maiden name was hard to pronounce. I never questioned it. Thomas spoke next. I met her at a tech conference. She seemed knowledgeable about startups, said she'd done consulting work for several companies. We started dating. Eventually, she moved in with me. Around that time, I made her COO of my company. It seemed like a good idea. She was organized, detail-oriented. But then things started disappearing. Small amounts at first, from the operating account. When I confronted her, she turned it around on me, said I'd been using company funds for personal expenses, said she had documentation. She threatened to go to our investors and board members unless I paid her off. I gave her $200,000 just to make her go away. Why didn't you go to the police? Thomas looked away. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. I had used some company money inappropriately, nothing major, but enough that it would have looked bad. She knew that. She used it against me. I told them about Daniel, about the apartment, about Rebecca's current scheme. They listened without interrupting. She's evolved, Eric said when I finished. With me, she used the legal system. With Thomas, she used blackmail. Now she's combining both approaches. She's getting better at this. The question is, can we stop her? I said. Legally? Probably not, Thomas said. Everything she's done is in a grey area. Manipulation isn't illegal. Being a bad person isn't illegal. But we can warn others, Eric said. We can make sure your son knows the truth. We can document everything and put it out there. I tried showing Daniel evidence, I said. He didn't believe me. Because it came from you, Eric said. You're his father. He thinks you're biased. But if it comes from multiple sources, from people who have no reason to lie, it's harder to dismiss. I want to do something more, Thomas said. I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Frank said you're planning to set up some kind of warning system? I'm thinking about it, I said. A website, maybe, or a network, something that documents her pattern. Names, dates, outcomes. Make it searchable so that anyone doing their due diligence can find it. That's risky, Eric said. She could sue for defamation. Not if everything we post is factual and verifiable, I said. Public records, court documents, testimony from victims. We're not making accusations. We're presenting facts. Thomas leaned forward. I'm in. Whatever you need. Eric nodded slowly. Me too. But we need to be smart about this. We need to document everything, get legal advice, make sure we're protected. We spent the next 2 hours planning. By the time I left Eric's apartment, we had the outline of a strategy. It wasn't just about stopping Rebecca anymore. It was about making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. Rebecca's response came faster than I expected. 3 days after my meeting with Eric and Thomas, I received a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was thick, official, intimidating. Inside was a cease and desist order. Rebecca was threatening to sue me for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with her marriage. This is what Alan does, Sarah Mitchell said when I showed her the letter. He escalates. He tries to scare you into backing down. Will this hold up in court? Depends. Have you contacted Rebecca repeatedly? Have you made any false statements about her? I've told the truth. Then you're probably fine. But defending yourself in court is expensive and time-consuming. That's what they're counting on. They want you to give up because fighting costs too much. I'm not giving up. Sarah smiled grimly. Then we draft a response. But I need you to be honest with me about everything you've done. Every contact, every conversation, every piece of information you've gathered. If there's anything that could be used against you, I need to know now. I told her everything. The investigation, the meeting with Eric and Thomas, the plans for documentation. She listened, making notes, occasionally wincing. The website idea is going to be a problem, she said. Even if everything is factual, she could argue it's intended to harm her reputation. That's defamation per se. What if it's not a website? What if it's just private communication between potential victims? That's better. You'd be operating more like a warning network. Still risky, but less legally exposed. We drafted a response to the cease and desist. It was careful, measured, and firm. We denied all allegations, asserted my right to protect my assets and investigate threats, and indicated that any further legal action would be met with vigorous defense. 2 days after we sent the response, Daniel called me. I need you to stop, he said without preamble. His voice sounded exhausted. Whatever you're doing, whoever you're talking to, just stop. Daniel, Rebecca is talking about moving away. To California, maybe. She says New York is too toxic, that you've poisoned everyone against her. If we move, I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything I've built here. She's manipulating you. No, Dad, you're the one who's manipulating things. You hired a detective to spy on my wife. You've been contacting her ex-husband. You're trying to destroy my marriage. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need you to leave us alone. I sat holding the phone, feeling the weight of his words. Rebecca was winning. She was isolating Daniel, using threats of leaving to keep him compliant and painting me as the aggressor. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Frank called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I found something, he said. Someone you need to meet. Who? Just come to my office. I drove to Queens, navigating through traffic that seemed determined to slow me down. When I arrived at Frank's office, there was a woman sitting in the waiting area. She was maybe 40, with dark hair and tired eyes. She looked up when I entered. "Mr. Thompson," she said. "I'm Jennifer Kowalski, Rebecca's sister." I stopped. Her sister? Half-sister, technically. Same mother, different fathers. We haven't spoken in 6 years, but when Frank's people started asking around about Rebecca, someone told me. I thought you should know the truth. We sat in Frank's office, the three of us crowded into the small space. Jennifer pulled out a worn notebook. "Rebecca wasn't always like this," Jennifer began. "When we were kids, she was sweet, smart. But something changed after our mother died. Rebecca was 19. Mom left her some money. Not a lot, maybe $50,000. But Rebecca got obsessed with it. She started reading books about investing, about building wealth. She said she was never going to be poor again. What happened to the money? She lost most of it in a bad investment, some real estate scheme that fell apart. After that, she changed her approach. Instead of investing money, she started investing in people. Rich people. She'd find men with assets, figure out what they wanted, become that person. She got very good at it." "You make it sound calculated." "It was. She kept notes. I saw them once before we stopped talking. Lists of targets, their net worth, their vulnerabilities. She approached relationships like business transactions." Jennifer opened the notebook. Inside were photocopies of pages, lists, notes, strategies written in Rebecca's handwriting. "I kept these," Jennifer said. "After our final fight, I made copies of everything I could find. I thought someday I might need proof of what she'd become." I looked at the pages. They detailed Rebecca's plans for Eric Hartman, for Thomas Lee, for 2 other men I didn't recognize. Each entry included financial information, personality assessments, manipulation strategies. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because your son is in there." Jennifer flipped to a page near the end of the notebook. There, in Rebecca's neat handwriting, was Daniel's name. Next to it were notes about me, about my assets, about the apartment. Daniel, promising target. Father has significant assets. Emotionally distant relationship creates opportunity, needs validation, easily influenced. Long-term project, but potentially high value. Focus on isolation from family, established dependence. I felt sick reading it. Daniel wasn't her husband. He was her mark. Their entire relationship was a con. "Can I use this?" I asked. "That's why I'm here," Jennifer said. "Rebecca destroyed our family with her schemes. I don't want her to destroy yours. But you need to know, she's going to fight back. When Rebecca feels threatened, she gets dangerous." "How dangerous?" Jennifer's expression darkened. "There was a man, before Eric. His name was David. He figured out what she was doing and tried to expose her. She accused him of assault. Filed a police report, got a restraining order, told everyone who would listen that he'd been abusive. It wasn't true, but by the time the truth came out, his reputation was destroyed. He lost his job, his friends. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state just to get away from it all. She's willing to destroy lives to protect herself." "She sees it as self-defense," Jennifer said. "In her mind, she's just protecting what's hers. The fact that it was never really hers doesn't register." Frank leaned forward. "The question is, how do we use this information? If we show it to Daniel, Rebecca will claim Jennifer is lying, that the notebook is fabricated. She'll turn it into a family dispute." "Then we don't show it to Daniel," I said. "Not yet. We use it as leverage." "Against Rebecca?" "Against Alan. He's the one orchestrating the legal strategy. If he knows Rebecca has a documented history of fraud, if he knows he's helping a serial con artist, he might reconsider his involvement." "Alan doesn't care about morality," Frank said. "He cares about winning and getting paid." "Then we make it not worth his while," I said. We show him that this case is going to blow up in his face, that defending Rebecca will damage his reputation. We make him see that she's a liability. Jennifer nodded slowly. It might work. Alan's business depends on discretion. If Rebecca's past becomes public, if clients start associating him with her schemes, it could hurt him. Can I keep these copies? I asked Jennifer. They're yours, she said. Just promise me you'll stop her. I've watched Rebecca hurt too many people. It needs to end. Sarah Mitchell arranged a meeting with Alan Shepard. It took a week of back and forth, but eventually he agreed. We met at a neutral law office, a conference room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Alan arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with styled hair and an expensive suit. He sat across from Sarah and me, with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. This is highly irregular, Alan said. My client was clear that she doesn't want direct negotiation with Mr. Thompson. We're not here to negotiate, Sarah said. We're here to present information that might change your client's position. I doubt that. Sarah slid a folder across the table. Rebecca Kowalski, formerly Rebecca Hartman, formerly Rebecca Lee. 3 different identities, 3 different victims. Each time, the pattern is the same. Establish a relationship, gain access to assets, extract maximum value, move on. Alan opened the folder. His expression didn't change as he looked through the contents, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. This is all public record, he said. Old news. My client's past relationships have no bearing on her current marriage. The notebook isn't public record, Sarah said, sliding another document across. That's Rebecca's own handwriting, documenting her strategy for targeting Daniel Thompson. It shows premeditation, calculation, intent to defraud. Alan studied the photocopied pages. For the first time, his confidence seemed to waver. Where did you get this? That's not relevant, Sarah said. What's relevant is that it exists. And if this case goes to court, it will become part of the public record. The pattern will be undeniable. You're threatening my client. We're providing information, I said. Information that suggests your client isn't who she claims to be. If you continue to represent her in this matter, you'll be associated with her schemes. Your other clients might start asking questions. Your reputation might suffer. Alan closed the folder carefully. This is blackmail. This is truth, Sarah said. We're offering you a chance to step away before this gets messy. Rebecca can find another representative. But once this information is public, once the pattern is established, defending her becomes a lot more complicated. My client will sue. Let her try, Sarah said. We have documentation, witnesses, testimony from her previous victims. Every lawsuit she files will give us more opportunities to put this evidence on record. She'll become radioactive. No one will want to associate with her, including you. Alan stood up. I'll need to discuss this with my client. You do that, Sarah said. But Mr. Shepard, you should know that we're prepared to take this as far as it needs to go. If Rebecca wants a war, she'll get one. And in war, everyone gets damaged, including the people standing next to her. Alan left without another word. Sarah and I sat in the conference room for a few minutes after he was gone. Do you think he'll drop her? I asked. Maybe. Alan's a mercenary. He fights for whoever pays him, but he's not stupid. If representing Rebecca becomes more trouble than it's worth, he'll walk away. And if he doesn't? Then we go to court, Sarah said, and we destroy her credibility piece by piece. Alan called Sarah 3 days later. Rebecca was willing to negotiate. Not about the apartment, she still wanted that, but about the terms. She'd agreed to a gradual transfer over 5 years instead of immediate ownership. In exchange, I would cease all investigation and contact with her former victims. It's a trap, I said when Sarah told me. She's buying time to find another angle. Probably, Sarah agreed, but it also means she's worried. She wouldn't be negotiating if she felt secure. I'm not giving her the apartment. Then we refuse the offer. But you need to be prepared for what comes next. She's going to escalate. She's going to come after you harder. Sarah was right. 2 days after we refused the offer, I received a call from Daniel. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. His voice sounded strained. "Can you come to the apartment?" "Your apartment or mine?" "Yours. The one on Lexington. Rebecca and I are here." My chest tightened. "You're in my apartment." "Rebecca had a key made. She said you gave her permission to use it while we looked for a place. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." They'd broken into my apartment. Legally or illegally, they were there. "I'm on my way," I said. The drive into the city took 40 minutes. I used the time to call Sarah, to let her know what was happening. "Don't go in alone," she said. "If they're occupying the space, this could turn into a legal nightmare. I have to face them eventually." I arrived at the apartment building, a tall structure on Lexington Avenue that I'd bought into 23 years ago. The doorman recognized me and nodded as I passed. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, my heart pounding. The door to my apartment was unlocked. I pushed it open. Rebecca and Daniel sat in my living room like they owned it. Rebecca was on the couch, Daniel standing by the window. Boxes were stacked in the corner, their belongings already moved in. "What is this?" I asked. "We're moving in," Rebecca said simply. "The apartment is perfect for us. We've decided to make it work." "You can't just move into someone else's apartment." "Daniel is part owner," Rebecca said. "His contributions over the years established equity. Our attorney confirmed it." "Your attorney is wrong." "Then take us to court," Rebecca said with a smile. "But while that case works through the system, and it will take months, maybe years, we'll be living here. Possession is 9/10 of the law, isn't it?" I looked at Daniel. "You're okay with this? Breaking into your father's home?" "It's not breaking in if I have a key," Daniel said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, just sign it over. Make this easy. We can have a relationship if you stop fighting us." "I raised you better than this." "You raised me to be practical," Daniel said. "This is practical. The apartment makes sense for us. You barely use it." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Daniel's voice rose. "Your pride? Your need to control everything? Rebecca and I are building a life together. You're either part of that life or you're not, but you don't get to stand in our way." Rebecca stood up. "We're giving you 24 hours to decide. Sign over the apartment or we stay here and you can fight us in court. Either way, we win. We have possession now. That's all that matters." I left the apartment, my hands shaking with rage. They'd outmaneuvered me. While I'd been focused on legal strategies and documentation, they'd simply taken what they wanted. I called Sarah from my car. "They're squatting in my apartment." "That's illegal," Sarah said. "We can file for an emergency eviction." "How long will that take?" "In New York, weeks minimum. And if they argue they have an ownership interest, it could take months." I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the concrete walls. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was being stolen piece by piece, and my son was helping them do it. I thought about my options. I could file for eviction. I could take them to court. I could expose Rebecca's history to the world and hope Daniel eventually saw the truth. But all of those options took time, and time was what Rebecca wanted. Time to establish possession, time to wear me down, time to isolate Daniel further. I needed something immediate, something that would force Rebecca's hand right now. And then I remembered what Jennifer had said. When Rebecca feels threatened, she gets dangerous. Maybe it was time to threaten her. I went back to Frank's office. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Something that might cross some ethical lines." Frank raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Rebecca is in my apartment right now. She's moved her belongings in, established possession. But she's also technically trespassing. What if someone called the police?" "The police won't do anything about a civil dispute." "What if it wasn't a civil dispute? What if there was evidence of something criminal? Frank leaned back in his chair. What are you suggesting? Rebecca has a history of fraud. The notebook, the pattern of behavior, the multiple identities. What if someone tipped off the authorities? Not about the apartment situation, but about her other activities. Tax evasion, maybe, or identity fraud. That's a serious accusation. You'd need evidence. We have evidence. The notebook documents income she extracted from victims. Did she pay taxes on those settlements? On the money from her divorce? Frank was quiet for a moment. That's a federal crime. The IRS doesn't mess around. Exactly. You understand what you're doing. If Rebecca gets arrested, if she faces criminal charges, Daniel will see you as the person who destroyed his wife. He already sees me as the villain, I said. At least this way, Rebecca won't be able to hurt anyone else. Frank nodded slowly. I'll make some calls, see what I can find out about her tax situation, but I need you to be certain about this. Once we start this process, there's no taking it back. I'm certain. While Frank investigated Rebecca's tax history, I focused on the immediate problem of the apartment. Sarah filed an emergency motion for eviction, but the hearing wouldn't be for another 3 weeks. In the meantime, Rebecca and Daniel were living in my space, sleeping in my bed, using my belongings. I couldn't let it stand. On the 4th night of their occupation, I returned to the apartment at 2 a.m. I still had my keys. They hadn't changed the locks yet. I let myself in quietly. The apartment was dark. I could hear someone snoring in the bedroom. Daniel, probably. I moved through the space like a ghost, retrieving specific items. Financial documents from my safe. A laptop that had personal files. The spare keys to my rental properties. Things I should have removed before, but hadn't thought to protect. As I worked, I heard movement. A door opening. Light spilled from the bedroom. Who's there? Rebecca's voice, sharp with alarm. I froze. Then, calmly, I said, I'm retrieving my belongings. Rebecca appeared in the hallway, wearing Daniel's t-shirt. You're trespassing. It's my apartment. Not anymore. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said. Tell them you're squatting in someone else's home. Tell them you broke in and changed the locks without the owner's permission. I have permission. Daniel gave it to me. Daniel doesn't own this apartment. The trust does. And the trust didn't authorize you to be here. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. You transferred it to a trust? 3 weeks ago. This apartment isn't mine anymore, which means you're not squatting from me. You're squatting from a legal entity that has no emotional attachment to you whatsoever. The trust's attorneys will evict you without hesitation. I saw the realization cross her face. She'd made her move too late. The asset she wanted was no longer accessible. You bastard, she whispered. I learned from the best, I said. Daniel appeared behind her, rubbing his eyes. Dad, what's going on? I'm leaving, I said, and tomorrow you'll be receiving eviction papers from the trust's attorneys. I suggest you start packing. I walked out, carrying my documents and belongings. Behind me, I heard Rebecca's voice rising in anger, heard Daniel trying to calm her down. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd protected what I could. Now it was time to go on offense. Frank called me a week later. The IRS is interested, he said. Very interested. What did you find? Rebecca claimed her divorce settlement as a property division, which isn't taxable. But the payment from Thomas Lee, that was a settlement for alleged unpaid work. That's taxable income. She never reported it. How much did she owe? About $60,000 in taxes plus penalties and interest. The IRS doesn't like it when people hide income. They're opening an investigation. How long before anything happens? Could be months, could be years. The IRS moves slowly. But once they start investigating, they don't stop. And if Rebecca has been hiding other income, if there are more unreported settlements, she's looking at serious consequences. I felt a grim satisfaction. It wasn't immediate justice, but it was something. Meanwhile, the eviction case moved forward. The trust's attorneys were aggressive, filing motion after motion. Rebecca fought back, but her arguments were weak. She couldn't prove ownership. She couldn't prove Daniel had any legal right to the apartment. The best she could argue was that they'd been promised access, but promises weren't enforceable without documentation. Daniel stopped taking my calls entirely. I sent him letters, emails, texts. All went unanswered. Through the grapevine, through Sarah's legal connections, I heard that he and Rebecca were struggling. Daniel's job was in jeopardy because of the stress. Rebecca was spending money frantically, as if trying to solve their problems through shopping. Eric and Thomas kept me updated on their own efforts. They'd created a private database, a network of Rebecca's victims and potential victims. When someone new started dating Rebecca, or whatever name she was using, word would spread. Warnings would be issued. She was becoming toxic, unhireable, undateable. She knows we're doing this, Eric said during one of our meetings. Her social media presence has disappeared. She's gone dark. That means she's planning something, Thomas said. People like Rebecca don't just give up. He was right. 2 weeks later, Rebecca filed a lawsuit. Not against me. She'd learned that was futile. Instead, she sued the trust. She claimed the transfer of assets to the trust was fraudulent, designed specifically to defraud her and Daniel. She was seeking to have the trust dissolved and all assets returned to my name. This is a Hail Mary, Sarah said when she showed me the filing. She's trying anything she can, but it won't work. Trusts are legally protected. You established it with proper documentation, proper legal oversight. She can't touch it. Will it cost us? In legal fees? Yes, but we'll win. The case went to court. It was my first time seeing Rebecca since the apartment confrontation. She sat at the plaintiff's table with a new attorney. Alan had indeed dropped her, looking calm and collected. Daniel sat beside her, his expression hollow. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Rebecca's attorney argued that the trust was created specifically to avoid paying debts to Daniel. Sarah countered that I had every right to protect my assets from potential claims, especially when those claims were baseless. The judge was an older woman with grey hair and no patience for nonsense. She listened to both sides, reviewed the documentation, and made her ruling. The trust was established legally and with proper documentation, she said. There's no evidence of fraud. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed. Rebecca's face went white. She started to stand, started to say something, but her attorney pulled her back down. Daniel looked at me across the courtroom. For just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Doubt, maybe. Or regret. But then Rebecca leaned over and whispered something to him, and his expression hardened again. They left without speaking to me. 6 months passed. The eviction was finalized. Rebecca and Daniel moved to a small rental in Queens, far from the life they'd envisioned. Daniel's job situation stabilized, but barely. Rebecca's reputation in their social circle was destroyed. People knew who she was now, what she was. I should have felt victorious. I'd protected my assets. I'd exposed Rebecca. I'd won. But I'd also lost my son. I tried one more time to reach out to Daniel. I sent him a letter, handwritten, honest. I told him I loved him. I told him the door was always open. I told him that no matter what had happened, he was still my son. He didn't respond. I began to accept that maybe this was how it ended. Maybe some relationships couldn't be repaired. Maybe the damage was too deep. And then I got a call from Jennifer. Rebecca's pregnant, she said without preamble. I felt my chest tighten. How do you know? I still have connections to her old friends. Word is spreading. She announced it last week. A baby, a grandchild, another complication in an already impossible situation. There's something else, Jennifer said. Rebecca's been looking into surrogacy records. I think she's planning something. What do you mean? I mean, the pregnancy might not be real, or it might not be Daniel's. She's done this before, with David, the man I told you about. She faked a pregnancy to keep him from leaving. When he found out, that's when he tried to expose her. How would she fake it now? There are tests, doctor's appointments. I don't know all the details, but Rebecca's creative and desperate. If she thinks a baby will secure her position with Daniel, secure access to money, she'll find a way. I thanked Jennifer and hung up. Then I called Frank. I need you to verify something, I said. Daniel's wife claims she's pregnant. I need to know if it's true. That's going to be difficult. Medical records are private. Find a way. It took Frank 2 weeks. When he called me back, his voice was grim. Rebecca's pregnant, he said. That part is true, but the timeline doesn't match. What do you mean? She's further along than she should be. If Daniel is the father, conception would have happened before they met. That's impossible. So she was already pregnant when she met Daniel. Or she got pregnant by someone else early in their relationship. Either way, the math doesn't work. I sat with this information for a long time. It was the final piece of evidence, the final proof of Rebecca's deception. But it was also the most dangerous. If I told Daniel, if I showed him proof that the baby wasn't his, it would destroy him. But it would also free him. I called Sarah. I need to file for a paternity test, I said, on my son's behalf. You can't do that. You're not the father or the mother. You have no standing. What if Daniel's not the father either? I told her what Frank had found. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. If you pursue this, if you force a paternity test, you're going nuclear, she said. This isn't about property anymore. This is about destroying whatever remains of Daniel's relationship with Rebecca. He deserves to know the truth. Maybe, but are you sure you're doing this for him? Or are you doing it for revenge? I thought about that question for a long time after we hung up. Was this revenge, or was it protection? I decided it was both, and I decided it was necessary. The paternity case was complex. I couldn't file it myself, but Eric had connections. His attorney knew people who specialized in family law, in cases involving fraud and misrepresentation. We built a case not around my relationship with Daniel, but around Rebecca's pattern of deception. We filed it as a civil matter, arguing that Rebecca had knowingly misrepresented the child's paternity to secure financial support and legal benefits from Daniel. We had the timeline. We had Rebecca's history. We had Jennifer's testimony about her past fake pregnancy. The court ordered a hearing. I sat in that courtroom, my hands shaking, knowing that this was the end. One way or another, everything would be revealed here. Rebecca arrived with her new attorney. She was visibly pregnant now, maybe 6 months along. She looked tired, stressed, older than her years. Daniel was beside her, his expression unreadable. The judge reviewed the evidence. The timeline, the medical records, Rebecca's history. Mrs. Thompson, the judge said, can you explain the discrepancy in the conception dates? Rebecca's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client's medical records are private. The timeline is consistent with her marriage to Mr. Daniel Thompson. Any discrepancy is likely due to imprecise dating methods. The records show conception occurred at least 2 weeks before the couple met, the judge said. That's not imprecise. That's impossible. Rebecca stood up, ignoring her attorney's attempts to stop her. This is harassment, she said, her voice shaking. This man, Daniel's father, has done everything he can to destroy my marriage. Now he's attacking my unborn child. It's sick. It's vindictive. Answer the question, the judge said. Is Daniel Thompson the biological father of your child? Rebecca looked at Daniel. For just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw fear in her eyes. Real, genuine fear. Yes, she said. Of course he is. Then you'll have no objection to a paternity test. I object on principle. This is invasive. This is traumatic. I shouldn't have to prove. Mrs. Thompson, the judge interrupted, a simple DNA test will resolve this matter. If you're telling the truth, the test will confirm it. If you're not—" She paused. "Then we have a much larger problem." Rebecca sat down. Her attorney whispered something to her. She shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll agree to the test," the attorney said finally. "Under protest." The hearing was adjourned. Results would take 2 weeks. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, Daniel approached me. It was the first time we'd spoken in months. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Because you deserve to know the truth." "What if the truth destroys everything?" "Then at least you'll be free." Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then he walked away, following Rebecca out of the courthouse. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Sarah's voice was steady, professional. "The results are in," she said. "Daniel is not the father." I felt something break inside me. Not satisfaction, not victory, just sadness for everything that had been lost. What happens now? There's another hearing scheduled. Rebecca will have to appear. So will Daniel. Will he be there? I don't know. The hearing was set for the following Monday. I arrived early, sitting in the back of the courtroom. The room gradually filled. Attorneys, clerks, other cases waiting to be heard. Rebecca arrived with her attorney. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The pregnancy was obvious now. Her body changed by carrying a child that wasn't Daniel's. But Daniel didn't come. "Where is Mr. Daniel Thompson?" the judge asked. Rebecca's attorney stood. "My client's husband has chosen not to attend, Your Honor. This is a deeply personal matter, and he feels his presence would only add to the trauma. The court required his attendance. With respect, Your Honor, you can't force him to be here." The judge looked displeased but continued. "The paternity test results have been submitted. They conclusively show that Daniel Thompson is not the biological father of the child Mrs. Thompson is carrying." "Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say?" Rebecca stood slowly. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice barely audible. "Before I met Daniel, there was someone else. Brief, meaningless. When I realized I was pregnant, I hoped, that Daniel might be the father. The timeline was close. I convinced myself it was possible. So you lied to your husband." "I made a mistake," Rebecca repeated. "I was scared. I loved Daniel. I didn't want to lose him." "Did you marry Mr. Thompson knowing he might not be the father of your child?" Rebecca didn't answer. "Mrs. Thompson, answer the question." "Yes," she whispered. "I knew it was possible." The judge made notes. "This court finds that Mrs. Thompson knowingly misrepresented material facts regarding her pregnancy to Mr. Daniel Thompson. This constitutes fraud. All claims Mrs. Thompson has made regarding property rights through her marriage to Mr. Thompson are hereby dismissed. Additionally, Mr. Thompson has grounds for annulment based on fraudulent inducement to marriage." Rebecca's attorney tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a look. "Is there anything else?" the judge asked. My attorney stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to call an additional witness. Someone who can provide context about Mrs. Thompson's pattern of behavior." I felt my heart race. We'd discussed this possibility, but I hadn't been certain Sarah would actually do it. "Who is this witness?" the judge asked. "Jennifer Kowalski, Mrs. Thompson's sister." Rebecca's head snapped up. "No, you can't." "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said sharply, "sit down." Jennifer entered from the back of the courtroom. She looked at Rebecca once, her expression sad but determined, then took the witness stand. Over the next 30 minutes, Jennifer testified. She talked about Rebecca's history, her pattern of targeting wealthy men, her fake pregnancies, her multiple identities. She showed the notebook, the documentation, the proof. Rebecca sat frozen, her face white. When Jennifer finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Rebecca with something close to disgust. "Mrs. Thompson, this court is referring your case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal fraud charges. You're also being referred to the IRS for tax evasion investigation. Do you understand? Rebecca nodded mutely. This hearing is adjourned. As people began to file out, I saw Rebecca stand. She looked directly at me, her green eyes filled with hatred. You've destroyed everything, she said. No, I replied. You did that yourself. She left without another word, her attorney trailing behind her, already distancing himself from the wreckage. I stood in that courtroom for a long time, after everyone else had gone. I'd won. Rebecca was exposed, her schemes unraveled, her future in jeopardy. But Daniel still wasn't here. My son was still lost to me, and that was the price of victory.